Now, someone who does the opposite of what we do here is featured in this next video by Paul Joseph Watson. And that person's name is Oprah Winfrey. And she likes to do a bunch of meaningless, unsubstantial things that have the cloak of charity and, sprinkles of good New World Order globalism to everything that she does. And the coterie of people that she hangs around with are a group that, well, you know what they say, birds that flock children to get. No, anyway, they have a saying about birds that flock together, and it pertains to her and her Epstein list friends and jet setters and people who go out in front of audiences like this at the DNC and they say a whole bunch of cartoonish stuff and no one really calls them out on it or holds them to account or fact checks them. They're just able to kind of spew and conjure in the audience that which is unreal and illusory and will never be a benefit to that audience. And yet they clap like seals for it. And it's hilarious. If you're not in that group, we're outside watching this, and this is our entertainment. So let's go to Paul Joseph Watson. Then we'll go to Russell Brand, because somebody trolled a bunch of people. Well, there were several trolls. There were several professional trolls. We could talk about the different ones. There was James O'Keefe, and there's this guy who I thought was Danny Polishchuk. And then there's, anyway, we'll get to it. But the he, they pronouns was one of the ones that went biggest because it got caught on BC. And Matt Walsh also trolled Don Lemon with project2025.com or something like that. So anyway, let's get to the clips. We're going first to Paul Joseph Watson, and Oprah's an idiot.
I've seen racism and sexism and income inequality and division. I've not only seen it, at times I've been on the receiving end of it.
What?
Racism and sexism and income inequality. I've been on the receiving end of it.
You're literally a black female with a net worth of $3 billion. And you think you've suffered income equality discrimination based on sexism and racism?
I've been on the receiving end of it.
Oh, poor thing. She's so oppressed. She owns a 23,000 square foot, $100 million neo-Georgian mansion in California with 70 acres, 14 bathrooms and 2 home theaters. Private pool, wine cellar and tennis courts. But she's so oppressed.
Racism.
Another 8,700 square foot home in Colorado. So oppressed.
Sexism.
Another 163 acre estate in Hawaii. So oppressed.
Income inequality.
Another 7,300 square foot residence in Washington. 2 more estates in Montecito, making her property portfolio alone worth more than $500 million. So oppressed.
I've been on the receiving end of it.
She was already earning $30 million a year in her 30s. And by the time her TV show ended in 2011, she was making $315 million a year. That's $10 a second, or $864,000 every single day. So oppressed.
Racism.
She wears jeans that cost nearly $3,000 a pair. She vacations on one of the largest luxury private sailing yachts in the world. Charges around $2.5 million just to give a speech, and still somehow pretends to be resentful about how hard done by she's been.
I've been on the receiving end of it.
If Oprah's success was impacted by income inequality discrimination based on sexism and racism, I'd like to see what her net worth would be if it hadn't. She'd be richer than Elon Musk. She's been in the top 0.1% nearly her entire adult life as a female black woman, and she's still got the nerve to tell you sexism and racism held her back.
Racism and sexism.
Of course Oprah had to mention the racism and misogyny she's faced. From a country that made her world famous and a mega billionaire and shown her enormous love and adoration, legions of devoted middle-class women made Oprah one of the richest people in the country, maybe richest black female in history. And yet it wasn't enough. They were all racist anyway.
Kamala Harris!
The media responded to Oprah's speech with their usual flair for impartiality by calling it no nonsense, despite it being literally the epitome of nonsense.
Let us choose common sense over nonsense.
Oh yes, good old common sense. From the party of men can get pregnant, toddlers should be able to choose their own gender, and 5-year-old children should be given sex education in kindergarten. Just good old down-home common sense.
Just plain common sense.
I'm a busy boy and I don't always have much time for breakfast. And let's face it, if you're in a hurry, the options can be a bit bland and basic. Until now. What if I told you there was a cereal with 0 sugar that was also high protein, keto friendly, with no artificial ingredients and great for childless cat ladies? But it didn't quite go as planned.
We just try to do the best we can to save them. And if the place happens to belong to a childless cat lady,
awkward. The DNC also continued to subject us to the absurd fallacy that the Democrats are the party of the people.
Challenge the people at the top and empower the people at the bottom.
They're really going to hold the corporate elite to account, while literally being bankrolled by them as their overlords watched down from above at this very conference.
A big theme here at the DNC is that they're going to go after corporate gouging, and they're going to go after corporations, whether it's in taxes, largesse, loopholes. Let me reveal a reality to you that has to be spoken to here, okay? Greg, look at the ring of sweets, okay? This is not unique to Democrats. There is a game of money. When people talk about uniparty, we are strangled by the money reality in our politics. Those sweets start at 500 grand. You think there's like a teacher group up in there? You think it's like the Cub Scouts of Columbia County, South Carolina, that's up in those boxes? Because that's the game. You pay to play. Those boxes are filled with the same people that they say they're going to regulate. They are literally looking down on the faithful and being told, yeah, we're going to break down on them. We're going to make them pay their share.
Meanwhile, Biden's Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, also completely humiliated herself after the Bureau of Labor Statistics announced that 818,000 jobs supposedly created by the Biden-Harris White House turned out to not actually exist.
It comes in at 818,000.
Raimondo claimed it was all fake news invented by Donald Trump.
When you hear that, do you potentially think that this new numbers could be a liability for this campaign?
No, when I hear that, first of all, I don't believe it because I've never heard Donald Trump say anything truthful.
It is, though, from the Bureau of Labor.
I'm not familiar with that.
Right, so you're the head of a body that serves as the principal advisor to the President of the United States on all matters related to commerce, and you've never heard of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a government department that's been in existence for 140 years.
I'm not familiar with that.
All this utter drivel, and cackling Kamala hasn't even given a speech yet.
Like, everybody needs to be woke.
Frankly, make me wonder how in the world he still makes these kinds of stages, to be honest.
Does the Democrat Party have a testosterone problem? Is it a party that no longer is interested in reaching out, not just to, like, I don't know, Joe Rogan or The Rock? And by the way, Joe Rogan is the most significant and successful broadcaster in America right now. So we're not talking about, like, sort of Hell's Angels and meatheads. We're talking actually about working class people. The Democrat Party has given up on the working class. It no longer is interested in reaching people on the basis of economics or on the basis of jobs. It seems to have an extraordinary new manifesto that is organized around amorphous ideas that are to do with personal identity and biology. And I would say somewhere in the midst of it is a kind of deep loathing of human beings when, oddly, they claim to be all about joy. Let's have a look at this. Isn't there an interesting bit of punditry here on this CNN panel where it's pointed out that Bill Clinton was once the kind of politician that reached blue-collar or working-class Americans. It's accepted now that Donald Trump owns that demographic. Why is that? What does it tell you? And more importantly, what does this weird rebrand tell us about who the DNC is for now?
You know, Bill Clinton makes me think about my dad in Western Kentucky. You know, when I was growing up out there, my dad and all the other guys like my dad, blue-collar guys, they love Bill Clinton. Mm-hmm. All Clinton guys. And now my dad and every single one of them that I know, all Donald Trump guys. And when I see him come out here tonight and I think about the audience in this convention, I think the Democratic Party did once have a bunch of people who Bill Clinton would appeal to. I think they're gone. I think the people who, the blue-collar labor piece of the Democratic Party that propelled Bill Clinton in the 90s has completely and totally migrated over to Donald Trump. And so I wonder about the younger audience and how they view somebody like Bill Clinton today, because he's not a blue-collar hero to them. They know a lot of other things about him that, frankly, make me wonder how in the world he still makes these kinds of stages, to be honest.
Because what Bill Clinton represents now is, of course, to most people, that guy went to Epstein Island a lot. Didn't that guy have a pretty weird sex scandal while in office and pay someone off a significant amount of money, more than Stormy Daniels got off Trump, which apparently is the world's biggest deal and is used to endlessly vilify him? At the DNC, there are good billionaires and bad billionaires. Trump is a bad billionaire. That dude the other day, Jeff Privacy, that guy, he's a fantastic billionaire. He's the kind of billionaire that they advocate for. With them, there's people that can have sex scandals like Trump, and that's a bad sex scandal. Bill Clinton's sex scandal, that's a good sex scandal. It's because it has been absolutely voided of all meaning, other than the kind of peculiar idea that they are somehow representative of a new class of person that's willing to form a political alliance on the basis of identity. Now, you'll know by now that this was a prank, but the fact that this video got such massive attention and was able to dupe the BBC, who are the organisation that were conducting the interview, tells you something about what we think collectively the Democrat Party stands for now. This happens to be a parody and a pastiche, but reality is now such a ridiculous parody and pastiche that all of us find it plausible. Let's have a look.
What brought you out here today? No, listen, my name is Noah Schwartz. I use he, they pronouns. I'm just really excited that we have, the first black woman that could be the president of the United States. And, my wife, right, we're in a polyamorous relationship. The lover that my wife took is African-American. And, I've learned so much about the struggle that people of color go through as a result of my wife's boyfriend. And so I'm excited to really do my part to show solidarity for my marginalized communities. And, the best way to do that is to get the first woman of color to be the commander-in-chief. And I'm really excited. I'm so pumped.
Were you this pumped and excited when Joe Biden was the nominee?
I mean, listen, I would vote for a corpse over voting for Donald Trump because he's a disgusting fascist, white supremacist pig. But now, we get to really make history. We have, like I said, we have the first woman of color to be president of the United States. And, our country, it was founded on the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Kamala Harris, nothing embodies those values more than a Kamala Harris presidency. So I'm pumped. I'm ready. I am so excited. I'm a proud white dude for Kamala Harris, baby. Let's go. Woo!
Have you seen any excitement at a Democratic event in this stadium? Or?
No, listen, this is amazing. You can't generate. I couldn't see any more excitement. The only way there could be any more excitement is if maybe you had an artist or a celebrity performing or opening for Kamala. But no, this is amazing. This is celebrity level of excitement. This is a rock star. And then, the thing that I'm the happiest about when it comes to Kamala Harris presidency, it's the economy. And, I'm really excited about how she finally wants to put a cap on prices at the grocery store. And, look, even if price controls, may lead to shortages of food and basic goods, the shortages will lead to rationing, and rationing, that leads to equity, and we need to be a more equitable place in America to dismantle our legacy of white supremacy. So thank you so much for hearing my voice and so many voices like me.
Reality is beyond parody. That much is true, because when someone does a parody, it seems entirely plausible. Perhaps that's because we have a DNC where people can...
I mean, I think there was a point where that comedian who was trolling BBC was like, okay, they're letting me do it. And then there was a point where he's like, I can't believe they're still letting me do it. And then he's at a point where he's like, I need to egress out of this situation, because BBC, I think he expected BBC to catch on to it and throw him off or get rid of him. And they just kept him standing there. It was news. There was nothing contradictory about what he was saying. But those of us who are watching a little Grand Theft World, we heard all those contradictions. They were hilarious and very well scripted. And that type of improv, it's improvisation, as they said. Doing it on the spot, doing it live. He might have thought about it. There's not a whole lot of chance because like you got to make it up a little bit as you go. And that's a skill set that can be used to defend freedom right now. Sarcasm, memes, comedy. This is our high road. We make people laugh and they get a little bit of reality with it. I also thought, now maybe this is just me, Scott, but when I was watching the DNC, the difference was, for me, they were describing their audience as the blue collar workers. And I looked at their audience and what I saw was a bunch of management class people, not blue collar workers. And they kept referring to Trump's MAGA movement as Wall Street, like they're all the people in our New World Order VIP 4, right? Like the way that if you listen to DNC speech only, you would think that it's a bunch of these people at the top of this page. Like these are the Trump supporters, right? But, right? I mean, but if you go to the MAGA, if you look at like Trump's rally on July 13th, 2024, which was very famous for some reason. I forget what it was at this point. I'm sure it wasn't relevant, but like these are not the people that are at those rallies. The people that are at those rallies, they know how to drive farm tractors and ATVs, and they know how to, butcher animals, and they know how to work hard. Those are the blue collar people that are running stuff. And then there's a management class. It's called, in their parlance, they call them mandarins. And I do have a book on the mandarins. It's a prescribed ruling class for the elite to rule over the working class people, the blue collar people. The closest I could find on a quick inspection of my bookshelves is this book right here, Preparing for Power, America's Elite Boarding Schools. This is a preparation of the Mandarin class. The Mandarin book also has a dark cover on it like this too. So I'm going to find it. There's a lot of books on these topics that I have collected over the past 20 years. That's just one of them. But there is a Mandarin class. And if you look at the Democratic audience, aside from people of color who are there because they don't, it's a form of Stockholm syndrome only because when did the Democratic Party have its first black senators and congressmen? Not till like the civil rights era. Whereas the Republicans, the party of abolition of slavery, they had black congressmen and senators right out of the gate in the 1860s. So there's a party that was against slavery. There's a party that's for slavery. Unfortunately, they kind of like forgot what they're all about on both sides. The Democrats are pro-slavery, but their people don't know that. And the Republicans are kind of like pro-slavery because they forgot that they were anti-slavery at this point. So that's why I'm not either red team, blue team. I look through a lens instead of a red-blue lens. I look through a lens of freedom and slavery. And when I see freedom, I support it. When I see slavery, I say, no, thank you, please. And I'm prepared to draw my line and say, no, thank you harder if I have to, right? So the people that you're watching in those DNC clips, yeah, those boxes are full of people that paid $500,000 or whatever that fee was. And there's probably a lot of people having sex up there because they paid a lot for that room for that night. And they're not into watching speeches anyway. They're up there snorting some of the stuff that they left in Biden's White House, right? There's a reason they call that house the White House in the first place. It's a place where you're untouchable. So anyway, this milieu of like incompetence, not recognizing its incompetence, getting together, supporting a corporate globalist class that is wholeheartedly the uni party that Fredo was talking about right there, right? And that is represented on both sides. Like Donald Trump took a lot of money from pharmaceutical companies and war companies and these sort of things, right? You can call them defense contractors, but look, am I going to try to gaslight you? They're war companies, right? So yeah, there's that type of corruption precipitating down on both sides of our political spectrum. And if if that's the only way forward, you have to choose the lesser of two evils, I guess. But in a way of moving forward as a place that doesn't go to civil war or World War III, I think we need to start inspecting these systems and maybe pushing neutral, put it in neutral on some of these things that you guys are moving forward quickly on, like the whole communist agenda. Let's just pause for a second and consider what are the consequences down the road from the things that are being proposed? Because they're going to propose something that's like, oh, it'll alleviate your symptoms, but it's going to cause lifetime addiction. That's what they're talking about. The next 2 clips fully illustrate this. We're going to go to a clip from Redacted, and it's an author of a book that I'm going to put on my list as well, right after I read those Ken McCarthy books. And the second clip is from Peak Prosperity, Chris Martenson, who we have featured on this show for years. He does excellent work. I really like the way he thinks through problems and presents objective perspectives and lets you make up your own mind. He has some proof, some evidence. It's a longer presentation. I selected just a few minutes out of it. It's about the taxation, the changes in policies, inflation, then deflation to ruin the country. And it's been done in other countries prior to what they're doing here, but it's because they practiced in all these other countries that they're so confident that they could do the same thing here. They can have their color revolutions, and whether it's, Soros's color revolutions of 2004, that was the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, that led into the Maidan coup and what you see today in 2024 going on in Ukraine. So if you don't understand the history behind the current events, you're just repeating a story you heard on your favorite news channel, and you're not really doing a lot of good for your own freedom, let alone providing utility and value for others. So in an effort to provide you with more utility, understanding, and a basic situational report on what's going on, let's go first to Redacted, then we'll go to Chris Martenson from Peak Prosperity.
Vice President Kamala Harris' campaign promises have been called communist. The media says that's ridiculous. That's just a MAGA Trump talking point. Jack Posobiec is a Navy veteran and a popular conservative voice on X, and his recent book, Unhumans, is a strongly worded warning about the dangers of communism, specifically how it creeps into a society and takes hold of it in a way you don't see coming until it's too late. In fact, he tells how history has reframed certain leaders who fought against communism. I've been wanting to speak to him for a while. He joins us today. So thank you so much for joining me.
Well, I'm really excited to be here. What can I say? I'm a big fan of Redacted. I think they say long time, first time. So I think that's kind of how I feel right now.
Amazing. Okay, hopefully not the last time. So first of all, can you break it down for us? What is the threat of communism, and how do you see it playing out in American politics right now?
Yeah, sure. It's actually really simple, Natalie. So basically, communism is the weaponization of greed and the weaponization of hatred for and envy, specifically envy and greed. So the idea is that there's always going to be times in society where there are people who say, there are those who have more than me, and I wish that I had more. And certainly this is something that's endemic to human nature, and it cuts across all societies, it cuts across all cultures. It's always something that is part of humanity. And you can take that in a philosophical route, you can take that a religious route, but a lot of people agree that these feelings do exist, and I think they inherently do. And so the danger of using this for weaponization in politics is when people come in and say, if you want these things, then you can get up and take them. You can get up and take them from those who have more than you. You can get up and take them from those who not earn them, by the way. Earn is completely different. This is vindictive. This is angry. This is petty. It is grievance-based primarily, and it is always, always, always based on tearing down those who, for lack of a better term, have built things in the world, have accomplished things in the world, have gone out and done things in the world. And so when you get leaders who tap into this vein in the human psyche and then turn it against others in society, we've seen throughout history the absolute horrors that have come from it. It always ends in mass graves. It ends in piles of skulls. It ends in severe economic destruction. And oh, by the way, for the have-nots that they claim to be helping, they're typically ending up in a worse position than they were even under whatever the previous system was. And so when we see the dangers inherent in when people engage in these types of politics for short-term political political gain. We can already see this happening throughout the West, and now more and more increasingly in the United States.
So the way it's playing out in Kamala Harris's proposals for the economy is very much strengthen the government, give the government all the power to decide what you buy, who buys what, make sure that the wealthiest are regulated but it's a ruse, right? Because it will make some people very powerful and wealthy, and it will make the rest of us dependent on the government. But it's being sold under this bill of goods as equality. Now, you point out how this played out for the Bolsheviks. Can you just sort of give us that cautionary tale and how you see this economically being sold under this faux empowerment?
Oh, sure. So now the Bolsheviks, so typically when we break down in the book in Unhumans that we basically put it down this way. The communism is a tactic. It is not an ideology. It's not a philosophy the way people understand it. It's actually a tactic to rabble rouse and then to use that rabble to throw against whatever the existing order of a country or society is, to destabilize it and then erect new powers, new controllers, new players to take over whatever that government is. And it typically plays out in two stages. One is what we call OPE, or operational preparation of the environment. And then the next stage is the actual revolution of it itself. We're actually now in the revolution stage. So the operational preparation of the environment, and as a prior military intelligence officer, that this is something that we would learn is basically the idea of conducting operations prior to your actual operation. So basic changing the environment, changing systems, shaping the field of battle for your needs and for your interests, so that when you do commit to action, that you will be in a favorable position to do so. And so when we talk about that, what we see first, we break it down into three stages. The first is the separation, second is the messaging, and third is infiltration. So separation. Who are the targets for our revolution going to be? So we pick our targets, we go throughout a society and we say, okay, it's going to be the people who and typically, by the way, when we see with the left or the regime politics in the collective West right now, it's not usually economic. And so typically when I give these interviews, we've been talking more about cultural Marxism, because that's been the watchword of the new types of Marxism. However, in the last week or so, Kamala Harris, directly through her campaign, has dipped back into even the classical economic communism, yes, because she's adding on to it. So some of the groups that have been targeted, obviously religious groups, Christians, white males in general, anyone who is a less than subservient man, people who have money, people who are engaged in crypto, people who are walking outside of the mainstream financial institutions and the financial system, and of course anyone who stands against the goals of the globalist collective West are then targeted, or you're smeared as someone who is a traitor to your country and things like this because you stand against the globalist agenda. And so now,
but it's clever though. I just want to add this because I think the way that it's so cleverly spun is that it's spun as the patriarchy. It's only good for this certain amount of people. And actually, I didn't understand how I was rooting against capitalism until I read Carol Roth's book about the pandemic, when I thought, wait a minute, she's totally right. I see these onesies at Target talking about down with the patriarchy. What that is a reframing of communism in an empowering way, when you have to look at it and say, but I benefit from capitalism. My whole family, my whole life does. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I got excited about that.
It's a perfect example, because one of the issues that they've had in applying communism to the West is that really the free market system has been very successful. The Soviet Union fell in the early 1990s, so like 91, 92. So the free market system has been pushed across the globe, and even the Chinese Communist Party have adopted, by and large, many elements of the market economy. Just obviously none of the political openness of the West. And so what we've seen is a change in communism, moving away from the classical Marxist model of economics, but using the same tactic as always that you just described. And what I'm saying, you're dividing the country into the oppressor versus oppressed model. So there must always be an oppressor. So the oppressor must be systemic racism, the patriarchy, the Catholic Church, whatever figure, authority figure group you need to rail against. And then you go to your oppressed class. And your oppressed class, you go to them and say, look at these people, they're oppressing you. Follow me and I will lead you against them. Now, in the case of the Soviet Russia, which you mentioned, of course, the obvious target was the Romanov family and the Russian Empire and the dynasty. And what they'll do, and people always ask me this, to say, well, weren't there actual grievances? Wasn't there the system of serfdom in Russia? It's like, yes, there was actually. There were legitimate grievances. And so this becomes a flashpoint for the Bolsheviks and for Lenin. So when Lenin comes up, he isn't talking about, patriarchy and equity and systemic racism and these things, but what does he say? He says, peace, land, bread. So this is the messaging phase that I was talking about. So the message then becomes peace, land, bread. If you join with me, we will get peace, land, bread. And then what does he do? He infiltrates all throughout Russian society. And he's funded by the Germans, by the way, total German agent, which is why peace, by the way, is a huge plank of theirs, because Russia at the time was in a war with Germany that we call World War I. And it had been going much better than the communists would say. But, that's one of the things that Germany realized. Instead of fighting a two-front war, they said, well, why don't we just destabilize Russia and fund all these radicals and get them to start a civil war within Russia, and then we can knock them out. So it was a regime change operation, by the way, from the Germans, the same type of regime change operations we see always run by the collective West, that actually unleashed radicals taking over a country and then sending that country down a perpetual spiral that we know as the Soviet Union, where we saw mass slaughter of essentially what are the kulaks. And so the kulaks became the target after the Romanovs. And so the Romanov family, everybody knows, I think, but it bears saying, and of course we talk about this in Humans, the entire family was slaughtered. The women, the children of the Romanovs were stabbed, they were bayoneted, they were shot in the head. Even little Prince Alexei, the youngest member of the family, in a basement out in the woods where they dragged them to. And so there was no prison. It was mass slaughter and killing. And then once they ran out of Romanovs, they needed a new group to rail against, because again, to keep in power, they always have to have a group that they're calling the oppressors. And so they moved it down a rung, and communism never stays at just the 1%. Then it moves to, we think the kulaks are the ones who are actually the oppressors in society now, because we still haven't achieved our utopia. And what's a kulak? Well, for lack of a better term, a kulak might be what we call today a small business owner, someone who has a second house, someone who has an Airbnb. The middle class, someone who has maybe you have a home that you rent, something that, those people, I don't think by anyone's terms would be considered rich. They wouldn't be considered the 1%. You wouldn't be considered, someone who's like fantastically wealthy or anything like this. But of course, you would be targeted because, you're a landowner and no one is allowed to own land and no one is allowed to own property. And you're exploiting your tenants and you're exploiting those who are subject to your whims. And so then they get targeted next. And anyone who rails against this, anyone who goes against the confiscation of their property, anyone who goes against or speaks out against the political commissars running throughout society, well, guess what? You get sent to something called the gulags. And we've already seen this, by the way, with the squatters situation in New York City here today. This is classic communist play to say that someone who is not does not have a contract with you can enter your property and then gain rights to your home, a home that you own, if you are not evicting them. But then the government will come in and say that if you haven't evicted them for 30 days, then it becomes theirs and you have no right to evict them. This is a classic communist play again. So they're taking people who are that they describe as the have-nots and empowering them and weaponizing them against anyone who's got a little bit of money, anyone who's got, again, who's attained that middle-class household. And by the way, the word bourgeoisie, if you look it up in the original French, we tend to say bougie and we use it as slang to sort of mean like something that's very, very high end today. But if you actually look up the original word of bourgeoisie, because remember, France back then, and we call this a proto-communist revolution in the book, France had the aristocracy. So aristocracy already was a word and a class that the French knew. The bourgeoisie was not the aristocracy. The bourgeoisie meant the middle class. That's what the word actually uses. That's the word actually means in French.
So it was an attack on the middle class. Now, we don't have enough time to talk about these, but I want to let people know that when you read this book, you are forced to ask yourself, okay, wait, is that person history told me was the bad guy? What do I actually know about that for myself? So some of the people you take on, Marie Antoinette, Senator McCarthy, General Franco, Augusto Pinochet, and I found myself kind of reeling because you say they were anti-communist leaders that history has then denigrated, and you try to retell those stories. And it felt like, oh my gosh, you just ripped the rug right from under me, and I didn't know those things. Now, I myself, having lived in Portugal, had the same experience studying Salazar when I read all of these books about him, and I thought, wait, when does he get bad? What did he do to be canceled from history? It's very interesting, and I found myself thinking, where do I go to?
You're very close to including Salazar in the book.
Oh, okay. I could talk a blue streak about Salazar. We won't do that right now. And one of your quotes from General Franco is, "Wherever I am, there will be no communism." And that has become a bit of a manifesto throughout the book. One of the things I really want to ask you, though, is that watching the DNC this week, I think to myself, do those people know what they're championing for? For instance, watching Obama speak, I think, don't they know he murdered people in Libya and Syria?
I was there. I was in the room. I was in the room when Obama and Michelle were speaking.
Right. And so I'm just kind of thinking, watching these people, do you think they're just well-intentioned and not studying for the rights that they are championing to be taken from them? Is that your take on that?
So I think that there's an interesting clip that I saw earlier today where I think it was during one of the these roll calls that they're doing, and they're doing these roll calls of the different states. And there was a delegate who got up, and her name is Olivia Juliana. And one of the things that she stated during this roll call from the floor of the DNC was, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And that, to me, is a full-on depiction of exactly what I've been saying, that they claim that their movement is rooted in peace and justice and equality and righting the wrongs of history and righting the wrongs of society, and they're the crusaders. But she's essentially letting the cat out of the bag, that what it is they do, when they say eat the rich, they really mean that. And when they say rich, they're talking about people like you, people like the middle class. They're defining it in a way that I don't think any of us would define it. And when they say eat, they actually do mean tear down, destroy, imprison, and in some cases, or they would not mind if people lost their lives. And as we've seen throughout history, people will lose their lives if we go down this road. And so do I think that everyone there has these beliefs? Not necessarily, but I do think, though, one of the sort of social experiments that I did while I was there was I was walking around trying to see if I could get anyone to denounce the assassination attempt on President Trump. So he's obviously someone who's been targeted by them. I think he's mentioned more than any other policy at the DNC. That Trump was you're hearing more about Trump. I think I heard more about Trump at the DNC than I did at the RNC. And I was walking around for almost an hour, and I could only find one person who said that he denounced it. Every single other person would hear me and then just walk away when I brought it up. Well, you guys are against political violence, right? You talk about J6, you talk about Charlottesville, you talk about all these things. You're against political violence, right? And so they, at the core, and this is something people have to understand, is they view anyone who's not on board with them as standing in the way of their goals, standing in the way of their movement, standing in the way of the revolution, standing in the way of their utopia. And in Mao's China, in the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and I lived in China for several years, I speak Mandarin, and when you see those signs that were depicted under the necks and the heads of the individuals who were put on struggle session in these giant arenas, soccer stadiums, and the crimes that are listed under them typically will say something like right-wing extremist or anti-revolutionary extremist. So the enemies of the revolution are always smeared as extremists, are always smeared as purveyors of disinformation. And this is a communist tactic that has been used for over a century. And so what we're trying to do in the book is explain that these types of tactics have been used before. We are now seeing them being unleashed right now in real time, and give people a playbook to understand what's going on, and then also sort of a counter playbook to fight back.
Right. And so some liberal voices, including a piece in the Washington Post this week, say, well, Trump is accusing Kamala Harris of having communist policies, but this is not the flex that he thinks it is, because people are not concerned about it and they don't understand. So what you're pointing out is the thread that runs through communist societies that we are championing. So I want to thank you for coming on Redacted. And yeah, I'm going to suggest that people read this book, because not only do you have these cultural warnings, but also the end of the book has suggestions on how you can fight this in your own society, how you can champion this in wherever you live. So you can follow Jack on X. It's Jack, let's see, here it is, at Jack Poso, right? No. What is your Twitter? Yes, sorry.
Yeah, so Jack Posobiec or Jack Poso. Just go on X, look up Poso, you'll find me.
You're going to find him. Yeah, you're a popular on that
platform. In government. But at any rate, Biden, they say here, carrying on, quote, is proposing to increase the 3.8% Medicare tax to 5%. Oh, but for those earning at least $400,000. To shore up the program's trust fund. I love government humor. That's funny. There's no trust fund. There's a big stack of IOUs saying we borrowed this money. We promise to pay it back. There's no trust fund. The trust fund has funds in it held in trust. There is zero trust or funds in the Medicare trust fund. Anyway, carrying on, that would mean the richest taxpayers would pay a combined 44.6% federal rate on investment income and other earnings. The plan also, in green, calls for taxing assets when an owner dies, ending a benefit that allowed the unrealized depreciation to go untaxed. Allowed. It's so beneficent of them. Oh, my goodness. You've worked really hard your whole life. You die and you just want to pass that along to your children. No, you had unrealized depreciation in there. That we let that go untaxed. We're going to have to tax that. Now, we're going to get to that. Let's get to it right now. Because they never inflation adjust this stuff, right? So let's just look here. I live in Massachusetts. Let me bust this out. This is in Massachusetts. This is house prices, median house prices. And from here, from 2020, when they started printing money like crazy because of COVID, house prices went up about $150,000, and those would be called gains. Now, what happened? Did the house become worth more? Does it suddenly start performing valuable services it didn't do before? You know, you park your car in a garage, you still have a garage, but now you get a massage, right? No, it's still a house. Nothing happened. There was inflation. Inflation happened. This is inflation. Houses don't go up in price because they have more utility. They go up in price because of inflation. So let's just say that we had 150,000 of gains, right? Well, at 20% taxing of capital gains, unrealized capital gains, that'd be 30 grand you would owe on the government for them causing the price of your home to go up. And I said that accurately. Step 1, government creates inflation. Step 2, your assets inflate in price. Of course. Step 3, the government demands you pay them back part of the difference. And they're going to call that unrealized appreciation. No, it's inflation. So these things should always be inflation adjusted, right? So if I buy the S&P and it goes from $1,000 nominal holding to $1,500, but $250 of that was inflation, that's not gains. That's not gains. This is a simple concept, but of course the government's all like confused about it all the time. They pretend like they don't know what inflation is, but we'll get to more of that in just a second. All right. So hey, but what about my unrealized losses? My unrealized gains they want to come after, but what about my unrealized losses? Sorry, Charlie. Nothing doing. We're only coming after the upside. We're never going to correct for the downside. It's just how these people roll. Okay. Now, from Zero Hedge, they noted here, they pulled out a piece of an article here, And they say here down in the red box in yellow that budget blueprint, they're saying, includes a 25% minimum tax on billionaire wealth, much of which is unrealized capital gains that are not currently subject to taxation. Oh no, somebody owns something that has gone up in price because we made it go up in price because we're the government. We can't get our hands on that. Dude, we did that. We built that. That's like, this is Al Gore's internet right here. Dude, we made your stuff go up in price. You owe us. You got to kick some of that back. A little taste. You got to give us a little taste. It's just, this is insane. But this is the world you live in. And of course, you have to understand that this is the world you live in. And you're going to have to plan accordingly because these people are here to wreck the system. That's what they're going to do. They're going to absolutely wreck the system. I mean, just destroy it. And you will experience that even though the Dow may be at 100,000, but it's still going to be a wrecked system because as the Dow goes to 100,000, the cost of a hot dog will go to $400, right? And it won't be quite, won't work out. Carrying on in white in the red box, it says a recent analysis by Americans for Tax Fairness estimated that U.S. billionaires and centimillionaires, that's $100 million, it's not billionaires anymore. We've already cut billionaires by a factor of 10, collectively held at least $8.5 trillion in unrealized capital gains in 2022, a massive untapped source of federal revenue. Massive untapped source. Look, these people have all this wealth right now because the Federal Reserve printed money and gave it to them. And I agree, they're sitting on a big old pile of unearned wealth that they really ought not to have because I believe in hard work and all of that. So that's a different story. But the idea that the government's going to come in and start wrestling with this idea of taking your untapped capital gains is a very dangerous concept, as I'll show you, because that's where it starts. Hop, skip, and a jump. And next thing you know, they're coming after your untaxed gains on the crocheting you sold at your yard sale. I mean, we just all know exactly how this works. They start here. Oh, soak the rich. We wear our beautiful silk dress. So tax the rich. We put it on our back. Anyway, and by billionaire, they did mean actually centimillionaire. They said Biden is proposing a 25% minimum tax rate on households worth at least $100 million. And they call it a billionaire tax. Look, basic math, folks. This is not hard. You're off by a factor of 10. It's called an order of magnitude. Very simple. Okay. At any rate, and so again, there may be legit issues here, but you and I both know that once they start down this path, that camel's nose gets under the tent, and next thing you know, they're coming after people with 10 million to their name, and then 1 million to their name, and then 100,000 to their name. Is just how this works time after time. So we should talk about it. Channeling this ignorance, Joe Albanese here says, you owe that only if you have assets of over 100 million and you calculated tax rate falls below the 20% minimum. That would have zero effect on the vast majority of Americans. And Adam down there, Adam is Numa writing, nope, wrong. Only 10,000 people are impacted by this, not gains of 20,000 for little fish. Try again. These people just don't know their history. Because here, let me help you out. Here's some history for you. Okay, when income tax started way back in the day, so the marginal income tax brackets back here in 1913, that's the year the Federal Reserve was started. Note that the marginal tax rate between 0 and 20,000 in 1913 dollars was 1%. That was the marginal tax, 1%. But if you adjust that 20 grand to 2015 dollars, that would have been equivalent to earning $480,000. You would have paid 1%, $4,800 equivalent in today's world for having $4,800 of $480,000 of income. And then it ratcheted up there such that you could actually hit a max of 7%. But that's if your income was around $12 million equivalent, right? So that would be that right there. So that's how it started. How's it going? So in 1913, top tax bracket was 7%. Now it's 39.6%. Tax bracket range was 1 to 7%. Now it's 10 to 39.6%. The top bracket was $11.8 million in equivalent use today. That's where it graduated to, right? Today, the top tax bracket is $466,950. Boink, you've hit the top. You're going to be paying 39.6% of every marginal dollar over that amount, whereas you didn't hit the top 7% amount until you hit that equivalent amount in today's dollars. Total tax revenues for the government in today's dollars, total tax revenues, $17.1 billion today. It's $3.364 trillion in 2017. As of current, it's about $4.4 $2 trillion. So I would much rather have a government operating on 17 billion than 4 trillion, because they do a lot of mischief with their 4 trillion. They bomb people and spend on dumb subsidies and promote all kinds of shenanigans, and they hire millions of people who do nothing but make sure that they can administrate really painful laws and rules and administrivia that does nothing to make our country better, safer, saner, healthier, happier. So I'm not a fan. Today's standard deduction, you were able to deduct your first $98,000 of income. Today, that's only $12,600. Total number of 1040s filed was 358,000. Today, it's 148,606,000. Total pages in the tax code, 400. You could reasonably understand the tax code. Today, 74,608. Which 1,000 pages do you want to specialize in, I guess, is the rule now. It's just, this is insane. So that's how it started, and this is where it's going. So that's why when you watch Kamala proposing to come after all these rich people, it's an important thing to understand, because that's actually, when you look at the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, this is just written down. This is how it works. First, plank 1 would be abolition of property, okay, and property rights. We're seeing that happen already, right? Remember, you'll own nothing and be happy. Well, if I don't own it, who does? Is it the government? Is there some rentier class that I'm renting from? But look at plank 2, a heavy, progressive, or graduated income tax. So Lenin said, here's the way you ruin a country, right? First, it's by a process of inflation, and then it's by a process of taxation, and then it's finally by a process, number 3, is deflation. So that would be the 3-step policy, right? You inflate, you tax, and then you pull the rug out and you go through a process of deflation. That way you ruin all of your capitalists. You ruin all the rich people because you hate them, because you're full of envy and resentment, right? You don't ever could think about, that person is rich and I envy that. So I'll tell you what, I will work harder and apply myself harder so that I can get there too. That's not the thing. It's like, no, we got to bring them down to our level. And when it's like, oh, the capital tax and the income tax are different, so we better bring this one to this one. No, bring this one down and figure out how to shrink the government. That would be the right way to go about this, but they're not going to do it, and this has huge impacts for the future. They're not going to do it. They're going to print more money. We'll get to that. I got to go through inflation more specifically, okay? Now, listen, one thing that I've learned through this whole COVID experience, and as the older I get, the more true this becomes. This is a Charlie Munger quote. If you don't know who he is formerly, he's dead now, the right-hand man of Warren Buffett. And Charlie was a smart guy, and he's just a quote machine, really erudite, very studied individual. And he said, show me the incentive, and I will show you the outcome. And I was thinking about this, and I was talking with somebody, and the question came up was, Chris, do you trust any experts? I thought about it. I'm like, not doctors anymore, that's for sure. Right? As a professional class, they've totally toasted their professional, like just crushed. I mean, they just destroyed themselves. Right? I was stumped until I realized, pilots. You know what? I actually trust pilots. And you know why? Because our incentives are 100% aligned. They can't just like crash the plane and walk off and I die, right? So a doctor can totally mistreat your cancer and doesn't matter. They still get paid, and the Porsche, gets paid off and all that other stuff. If doctors died every time their patients died, you'd probably see a very different treatment approach. Be like, Chris, we're going to have to keep you healthy. I'm going to come over to your house twice this week and make sure you're eating your veggies and sticking to your keto diet, right? The incentives have to be aligned. So I trust pilots because pilots have the same incentive I do, which is to land and not die, right? So that's why I think they do such a good job. And that's why, as a class, if you noticed, it's very, very rare to see pilot errors at all. And there's millions of flights happening all the time.
All right. So communism, more communism. You guys are starting to pick up the trend. It's not a philosophy. It's a way of plundering other people's wealth and production in a way that covers it like it's nonviolent when it is the epitome of a type of violence. Also, going back to the clip before that, I didn't realize the first time I checked out that clip. I guess I was listening to it. I didn't realize it was Jack Posobiec. So he works for the Office of Naval Intelligence. He's a former or maybe even present psychological warrior out there in the landscape. So you have to compare everything he said to reality. As I was listening, I was parsing it, and I wrote down, because we had just talked about Mandarins, right? The ruling class. He actually speaks Mandarin, and he did mention that he was in China. He didn't mention that he has a Chinese wife, and that I think that's part of why he speaks Mandarin. There was a lot of things he said that closely matched up to the reality that's being painted. I'm always interested in anyone who's formerly military intelligence speaking about these things. So you have to, verify then trust. And a lot of what he said is verifiable. So I'm going to trust it enough to learn more about what's in his book and what different views he might have on some of those communist uprisings, etc. So much to be learned. Did you make any notes during that, Scott?
Oh yeah, definitely. So, well, I heard a rumor that Jack Posobiec, when he was in the military, his job was to administer urinalyses. So, I don't know, but
sounds like a pissy job.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. But anyway, he's all over the place now, and so it's just one of those things. But anyway, one of the things I just wrote down that he was describing, the victim oppressor type of mentality. And it's like, that's like the most toxic, most dangerous thing I think that we're dealing with in our society right now, is the victim consciousness and the encouragement of victim mentality. And it really is so ironic, because when you adopt the victim mentality, then it creates like the ultimate form of slavery. It like creates this condition where you don't feel like you can rise above anything. You can't progress in life, and that there's always something outside of yourself that's holding you back and preventing you from being what you're actually meant to be. And so people that adopt that are just shooting themselves in the foot, really. It's this mental block that will always be there to keep people from actually achieving what they're meant to be. And now it's like, nowadays it's 2024. I don't care who you are. You can get out there and crush. Go get it, man. Like anybody. Like it fires me up to see people like just going out there and doing big things. You know what I'm saying? Like no matter all backgrounds, it's amazing. Like anybody that's just pep talk people, being like, this is like, I do this on my show all the time. This is like one of my main little things that I rant and rave about, is just about the idea that, there's never been a better time to get out there and crush. Like anything that you see that's outside of yourself, that's preventing you from going and doing whatever it is you're going to do, they just got to smash that. There's no, just absolutely no one's oppressing you. Go get it. Just go get it. So that was a big thing. Yeah. No.
Yeah, there's never been a time to step up for yourself. There's never been a better time to get autonomy.
Yeah.
This is what it's all about. This is a group of people every season stepping up for themselves. Some of them doing it for the first time. Some of them very introverted. Some of them very shy. Some of them not knowing how to make heads or tails out of a situation. And at the same time, they have colleagues and classmates that are highly advanced and very successful people. So it's a wide spectrum of people that are looking to have the knowledge, the wisdom, the understanding, the strategies, the principles, the tactics that you need on a daily basis to overcome the challenges and the problems and the obstacles, and to be able to move beyond it, because you have a strong mentality, you have an anti-fragile mentality, you have a growth mindset, and you have a strong group of people around you to help you learn and grow on a consistent basis. So being able to do that is something that happens twice a year, and we do it. Oh, I hit the wrong button. And we do it together. So it's not pre-recorded. Like most courses suck because they're pre-recorded. There's no community. There's no dynamic interactivity. And there's no real growth going on unless you're really disciplined and you wring the value out of that product. This is the opposite. It's designed to know the shortcomings of all the other offerings that are out there, and to say, what does it take to actually have a clean education of the self? What information do I need to know to move forward, to meet and greet challenges and obstacles in a way that I can have predictable outcomes and continually have success? If I could attain those tools, what kind of difference could I make in my future by engaging sooner than later? What's the opportunity cost on waiting to be competent in the skills I need in life to survive and thrive? So those are the types of things we tackle at getautonomy.info. We do it twice a year, 12 weeks at a time. There are 3 bonus weeks, and it is lifetime enrollment. So if you want to go through the course many, many times, you have the chance to do that, but you don't give yourself the chance if you don't go to getautonomy.info, click a button, and actually talk to a graduate and find out, get your questions answered, get your doubts dispelled, get yourself ready for productivity and growth, because that's what we do. And Scott's a graduate, and he's out there not taking the curriculum. He's out there applying the curriculum to his own business ventures and his liberty ventures too, because if you can make your offer to the public, it gives you the time, the means, the competency to have a hobby that promotes freedom and liberty at a time when freedom and liberty really could use the extra support. So by us learning how to support ourselves and be more self-reliant, we are getting better ourselves, our families, our communities at defending the freedom that we inherited and to attain cognitive liberty in our lifetimes and not be the gaslit people leading everyone off the cliff like a bunch of lemmings. We can be the ones that save a few at a time, one mind at a time, without violating anyone's free will. And everything that we do to promote the course is the same way we would teach you inside the course on how marketing and sales and all these other nuances of serving people are constructed. So getautonomy.info. The season starts a couple weeks from now. About 4 weeks from now, pretty much the end of September, and check it out. Make a decision on your own time, but we are starting at the end of September.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Can I piggyback off that for a second?
Please do. Yeah.
I think, okay. Well, what I was going to say is like, so yeah, I'm a season 8 graduate. I dipped my toes back in season 9 a little bit. I showed up to some of the Sunday Q&As, was getting some feedback. And then I just found myself just immersed in all these projects. Like I just, all of a sudden, you know, I've been podcasting for a while, but then all of a sudden, you know, I was working with Ryan at Last American Vagabond at the time. You know, I had all these other projects emerging, and now I'm just like full blown. Like I'm just like, I just literally spend all day, every day, just working on all these little different projects. And it's a lot of fun. I'm so blessed and so grateful. And the most recent one is, you guys, many of you know that I've been working on a music album for about 18 months, and it is dropping this Wednesday. This Wednesday, 8:28 p.m. Central Time. So if you go to my Rebunked X account or Rumble page, I'm going to be doing a live stream, a virtual record release party live stream where I'm going to stream the whole album start to finish. I have 9 music videos for all the songs, so each song has a freaking kick-ass music video to it, which is pretty revolutionary. I don't know anybody that's doing that for music for all of their songs on their albums. But anyway, I've had a lot of fun with it. I feel like right now I am no longer like doing the work. I feel like I'm just a vessel channeling this work into existence because I'm into such a like deep, like mind, sober but mind altered flow state with the whole thing that is just blowing my mind what's happening right now. And I'm so excited to share with you guys. So if you just come join me around 8:30 Central, 6:30 Pacific, 9:30 Eastern, we're going to rock out Wednesday night.
That is a great self-promotion, and I think you're losing your introversion. I think you're getting through it, bro. Yeah. Also, shout out to Ryan Christian. I heard he's got a little tendonitis. He's got his arm in a sling. It's got to be hard to be productive. I empathize, and I hope it heals up, buddy. Also, last but not least, on your music video set, once upon a time, the artist known as Beck, he released an album. I forget what it was called, but the album came with videos that he made with his friends for all the songs, and they were awesome. And so you could listen to the album or you could watch the album. And that was like something that happened 20 years ago. So for those of you who are young, you don't know who Beck is, but everyone else, you know who Beck is.
Bringing it back. And yeah, you guys, I think you're going to love it. It's like, this is like an actual legit studio produced, like highly produced album, radio ready. It's, you know, it's got some names you'll know. It's got Rob Dew and John Bound from InfoWars on it. It's got Gene from Faithless Town, my old band Hot Piranha, a live unreleased recording. It's freaking legit, you guys. I can't wait to share it with you guys. And
new hot music coming out of Nashville.
Yep.
Well played. Well played.
Thanks. All right.
Twice a year, I teach a course called Autonomy. It's a 12-week course. It teaches leadership, entrepreneur skills, executive skills, all these types of things that I saw were taken out of our education system in order to make the schooling or indoctrination system that we've all probably went through. And it has served us well enough to be interchangeable cogs in the machine of the globalists. But if we want a homestead, if we want write our own ticket, work from home job, work from anywhere type of situation, they're not exactly handing those out at the end of college. They give you a piece of paper and they're like, good luck. So reality is dropping us off here, but the demands of reality are up here. So I created Autonomy to help people close that gap for themselves so they can level up their skills to the demands of the situations that life is putting in front of us presently. Life's demands of intellect and understanding precision and complexity are ever increasing. The schooling didn't prepare us for it. The media is not going to do anything but reinforce what schooling prepared us for. And so we're going to have to take a leadership position and take steps off the beaten path to kind of blaze our own trail in life. What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come